Hi, I'm Mark.
Hi, I'm Scott, and this is Church is Lame, the podcast where we fix the church by revealing the stupid things churches do that break the entire body.
All right, Scott, tell me, what's lame this week?
Christianity Today has written multiple articles in this last week from the editorial staff as well as from the leadership. It has finally come to light that years and years of sexual harassment allegations have been ignored by the male leadership of the organization. It's heartbreaking. The article itself is literally just heartbreaking. So the story is talking about some former editors of the magazine. This is a long article from one of the editorial staff, and it literally goes into detail of every single altercation that they could write about. But it's everything that you would imagine it is. It's women being touched in ways they don't want to be touched. It's women being talked about or talked to in ways they don't want to be talked to, having to put up with behavior and sexual advances even after rebuffing those advances. And then anytime those advances were rebuffed or anytime somebody brought their complaint to HR, there were typically a price to be paid by whoever the person is who brought it to HR, whether it was the victim or whether it was somebody who even just observed something inappropriate and reported it to HR.
Well, for me, the thing that kind of struck me the most is this is Christianity Today. It's a generally respected, Christian publication.
Yeah, and we've quoted it many times.
Yeah, and it's not as if they haven't reported on other issues in the church with sexual harassment and, a negative culture, especially as regards women. So it's, shocking and kind of not, which is the sad part to me.
It's just a reminder that if we truly think that people in the church are all that different from people not in the church, that believers are really all that different than non-believers in the way we actually live our day-to-day lives, we are seriously deluding ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's putting it mildly.
I think this is a strong reminder. The church is special and unique and set apart. The people of the church are pretty dang disappointing.
Oh my, yeah. I was at a church and, had to deal with an issue of, pastoral discipline. Most people in that church, I was fine with, but there was a few I was like, I cannot honestly say that you're saved given your behavior right now.
One of the things that constantly gnaws at my brain is the predictability of it all. You know what I mean? So in this particular case, the predictableness of white men in leadership trying to sweep scandal under the rug. This is not the first time we've talked about sweeping things under the rug, about sweeping things under the rug and trying to keep it there, knowing that at some point it's going to come to light and it's going to blow up in their face. It just astounds me how predictable that is and how unsurprising. Like when you read the story, as much as your heart breaks, my brain just kind of goes, yeah, totally. This is the way it always happens, and this is the way it's going to keep happening.
Yeah, and I had so many moments of just face palming as I was looking over your article, right? Because so much of it is stuff we've already seen in other places, so why should we be surprised that it's here? But then it's like, it's a whole new set of just stupid rationales and stupid logics. I made a special note on here. I said, referred to Callie. He said that he touched people to encourage them to connect and to communicate effectively. I cannot think of a single moment in my life where I have needed to physically touch a female coworker in order to communicate, to connect, and to encourage. Like, what freak out, goofy, regressive world of female oppression do you live in? That you have to treat women this way to communicate? No. You're not gonna do this with a brand new male employee. So shut up.
Well, once again, totally predictable. This is exactly what happened at Willow Creek. Women saying being touched in a way that's inappropriate. It just doesn't happen anywhere else. And I understand that culture changes, and this idea of explicit consent and implied consent. This is kind of a new conversation, right? But even though the vocabulary is new, the behavior doesn't change over the time. Women will let you know, women will let you know if it's okay to be less than an arm's length away from them, right?
Right.
You respect my bubble and I respect your bubble. Any man that we would used to call a honorable man would keep a certain distance until it was clear that they were invited inside of that bubble. That has always been the case.
Yeah, in terms of communication, we refer to, 3 circles around a person. The outside most is going to be public space, and then you're going to have personal space, which is inside that, and the farthest inside is intimate space. We refer to it as intimate space. Why? Because you shouldn't be there unless you already have that intimacy with that person. I just don't understand. I cannot wrap my mind around how these dudes think that treating women this way, like some of the things, just like walking up to a female coworker and telling her that she's pretty or whatever. She looks really nice today or whatever. I've heard people saying to me in all earnestness, like, well, what's the problem with that? Like, well, the problem with it is you wouldn't say it to a male employee. You wouldn't go up to your coworker and be like, dude, you're looking real sexy today. I like it.
Right. And the thing is there are people out there who say, well, I do say that. But if you check their words are different. Like,
yes.
Like a man-to-man communication might be something like, hey, dude, you look really sharp today, Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with telling anybody that. There's nothing wrong with telling anybody that. This is not a cancel culture thing where I'm not telling people you shouldn't try to have a good rapport and relationship with your staff. But there are boundaries, and they're clear and they're explicit, and you need to honor them.
Yeah, and if you're not sure where those boundaries are, ask yourself this. Would you say it to your mom?
So one of the other notes I made about this, most churches and most Christian organizations are run by men. Mm-hmm. And so the reason why Christianity today is going to get a total pass on years and years and years of sexual abuse, sexual harassment, and exploitation is because these other men all throughout the industry of being a professional Christian don't want harsh punishments for themselves. And so they're going to let these guys off easy.
The kind of like old trite thing, but like when you ask a child, that you knew did something, like, well, what should I do to the person that did this? And then you watch them kind of say, well, if it's that, like, you should really be understanding. It's sad, it's like we should be happy when things are brought to the light, even when it's in ourselves, because ultimately that means, it's a sin that we can be confronted by, and we can move past, we can get over, we can heal from it, because the one thing that makes these sins the worst is the fact that they get kept hidden, I think.
It was so bad that the women of Christianity today said that they were so convinced that nothing would come out of complaining to HR, that they basically took it amongst themselves to organize their own protection and to look out for one another and to protect one another, because they knew that the office and the policies and the systems were a joke, and that the only way that sexual harassment wouldn't turn into sexual assault or sexual abuse was to have their own systems of protection, because there were no systems of accountability.
There's that element that, we dudes, right? Like we don't feel afraid if, we're somewhere, if a guy comes up to us and starts hitting on us, right? We're like, okay, whatever, dude, don't swing that way. Thanks. But right. We don't feel threatened by it. And I think a lot of guys don't actually understand how threatened women can feel by it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
When it's, us and another guy, right? Like we're generally on equal footing when it comes to muscular strength.
Right.
That's not how it is, between men and women. On average, men are quite a bit stronger than women, and
right.
And there's also power. When you have authority, when you have, over somebody has a power over you, it's like there's just so much at play here.
Right. When you live paycheck to paycheck, and losing your job means not knowing where the next mortgage payment's coming from, where the next
Mm-hmm.
meal's coming from. That's a power dynamic that you can't just explain away with, oh, well, there's other jobs out there. You'll find another job. That just doesn't cut it when you've got people that you need to care for and who depend on you.
There's an Old Testament verse, like if a woman is sexually attacked and, if she cries out, then she is not guilty of anything. But if she doesn't cry out, then she is guilty, right?
Yeah.
Unless it was in the wilderness where nobody could have heard her anyway. Some people are going to hear that and just kind of reject it. I get it. But it's really just says like, hey, if somebody, is crying for help, it's because they're being attacked.
Yeah.
Right. So like if you don't cry for help, and then you claim later that you were attacked, it's an issue. Except that we know that people, when they are confronted, you can have many different kinds of reactions. Sometimes, people will, lash out physically. Sometimes people will cry out. Sometimes people will freeze. Sometimes that they'll run away. And this is men or women. We don't know who in any given situation is going to do what. This is not hidden knowledge. This is common knowledge, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
And the fact that somebody used that verse to kind of say, if she hadn't said something until now, what was the problem then? Somebody in a position of power, able to influence the behaviors of those underneath them by intimidation, using the fact that they didn't stand up against them as justification that they did nothing wrong. It's like, that's just sick.
It's been my experience that usually at the workplace is where people are the best versions of themselves, because there are consequences for not being the best version of yourself. And then at home, bizarrely enough, because these are the people that you care about and love the most, is where people are generally the worst version of themselves. Nitpicky fights about things that don't matter, things like that. And so if this was the guys being the best versions of themselves, I can't even imagine what the normal version or the worst version of themselves are, except in this case, the editor was only brought down not by any of these allegations, not by any of the women who worked at Cristianity Today. He was arrested by the feds trying to pay for sex with a teenager.
Yeah, the moment you said, like your public face is your best face, I thought immediately of that. In private, that's who that person devolved into.
All is to say, like, if you're watching or listening to this podcast, watching this YouTube, and you have a role to play in ministry, you need to have your radar on for understanding that the people that you interact with professionally are being the best versions of themselves. And if the best version of themselves is not really cutting it, then you really need to be thinking about the people they are interacting with in their personal lives, because chances are it's even worse.
Just for anybody who's listening, whenever somebody has, the P word attached to their name, pastor, especially, those are people that we are trained from a very young age to defer a lot of authority to.
Right.
And I've heard many comments throughout my life, people looking at, a pastor and be like, well, I could never be that because, I'm not some super hyper moral being. It's like, well, guess what? Neither are your pastors.
Right.
Your pastors are not more moral than you because they want to be,
Right.
They're more moral than you because they have to hide it from you. It's one of those things where, and I'm not saying that it makes them bad people. I'm just saying it's like when you have all that attention on you, it's a little bit easier to kind of hide that stuff, to keep it down and to not give in to certain types of temptation. The other side is that you can get good at hiding things that you are doing.
Well, that's just part of the American social contract, right? We learned that from a very early age. All people desire approval, but especially young people. And so one of the ways we learn to get approval from our parents and from other adults is to hide the things that will not get positive reactions from the adults around us. And so that's something that is hard to unlearn and hard to undo.
Well, like the open secret concept, right? So we have a lot of people out there, they are this kind of a person and everybody knows it, but we all just kind of go, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, that's not really good thinking for a Christian. Like, as Christians, we really should be super opposed, I think, to that open secret. It's like, no. If something needs to be brought in the open, it needs to be brought in the open.
Right.
And that's God honoring.
This is yet another instance of an organization not having good systems in place, not having good processes in place to deal with the bad things when they happen. Bad things are going to happen. They are going to happen. We need to stop fooling ourselves that because we're Christians and we're working in these Christian organizations, that bad things don't happen. They do. And the best thing you can do for yourself as an organization is have those processes in place. So when things like this happen, nobody has to guess or worry how to respond. You've got the script. You have the steps. You know what to do. Like, oh, this person has been reported for a sexual misconduct. Well, it's time to put them on a leave of absence while we can do an investigation. So this is not like rocket science. This is all pretty well established stuff now.
Yeah, we need to stop, allowing people in positions of power to, have no accountability.
Yeah.
We need to stop victim blaming. We need to treat these accusations seriously, or else this is going to keep going.
Exactly. All right, Mark. So what did you find broken